So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Guy Kramer from CyberRes, a line of Micro Focus, a silver sponsor, to chair our first panel discussion on CNI and industry perspectives. Guy and the team, come on in. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks very much, Reid. Good evening. This is a talk about keys to the kingdom, UKNI, cyber resiliency. So on the panel with me this evening, I have Kavas Bhakti from EDF, DevSecOps Manager. I have Dr. James Blake, 20 years operational experience as a CISO, including at Mimecast and also Global Head of Cyber Excellence at JP Morgan and Chase, but currently focused on ransomware recovery from Rubrik. I have James Weston from Wessex Water as a cyber security manager. And I have Philip Tonkin, National Grid, Global Head of Cyber Operational Technology. So thanks very much for joining me on the panel this evening, all. So the first question, in terms of IT and OT, what are the intersections between them? Kavas, if you want to start off, please.
Sure. So I'll start by defining OT. There's a NIST definition, which is operational technology. It's a digital system that interacts with the physical world. But as you know, that's a huge range and variety of systems, so it's very hard to treat that as one. If we look at the 3 jobs I've had at EDF, firstly, I was looking after the security case for a nuclear power station, where a change needs a year of testing before you roll it out. But on the other hand, we have security controls like men with guns and bomb-proof doors. You then move on to my second job, where I was looking after the security of our smart meters. Those are built to a price point. They have to work for 15 years on a battery, and they're in an environment with openly hostile customers trying to tamper with them to commit fraud. And now I lead a team of people that look after things like all our internet-connected security systems. So I don't think there is one approach to securing operational technology, and you might even hear different definitions about what operational technology is. You have to look at the type of asset, what it's protecting, what risk you can afford to take in it, and then base your approach on that.
So I'm going to refer over to Jimmy. So apologies, it is James, but because there's 2 James on the panel and I've worked with Jimmy for quite a while, I'm referring to him as Jimmy so I don't get mixed up. So Jimmy, do you have an opinion on this, please?
I do. I mean, obviously I used to work in critical national infrastructure, but the kind that doesn't have wellheads and sluices and things like that. So I worked in the banking sector. And obviously telcos are another part of critical national infrastructure. So I think we need to cast the net fairly wide. So a lot of people obsessively focus on the OT side of things because it's new and it's sexy and it's the kind of thing vendors haven't sold products into before. So there's a lot of attention in that space. But I think, in terms of a resiliency mindset, I think OT and the people that have dealt with it historically have a much better approach than security, where we have a security mindset rather than, as the first session said, where we think about recovery. We still have this moat and wall mentality where we try and protect against everything. And having worked at a couple of organizations, Saudi Aramco being the classic example, where they'd focused on the OT systems, the oil kept flowing to the wellheads, but no one could charge for it because they had no operational systems. They actually had no telephones because it was a voice over IP system. But they couldn't also ship it because there was no logistics system. So they're 53 kilometer queues back over the UAE border. So there is this relationship between OT and IT is a complete dumpster fire, with this focus on defense rather than this ability to respond and recover, which is, ransomware is going to equally hit hospitals, utilities, and the IT systems that are now connected to OT systems as much as it is any other kind of vertical.
So that's a really interesting point, that the organisation was able to still extract the oil and to create their product, but actually they couldn't then export it and get it out to their network of outlets. Okay, so that's a really interesting point. In terms of risk then, So we've said that originally that we can't actually define one as either IT or OT. It depends on it doesn't necessarily sit within one specific area. It depends on what what role it is that they're carrying out. Is there any sort of best practices or things that we can think about in that area that would help push that? Or help progress with that. So I know that MITRE ATT&CK have brought out a new CNI version of their framework. Is there anything else that's coming out in that area that we're aware of? Or actually, James, you were saying about from an IT perspective that it's worth trying to focus on that more because actually the OT environment doesn't have interconnectivity with Ethernet, etc. at the moment, although that's coming.
Yeah, that was actually mentioned in the first session. So some of my thunder was stolen by the first session, and that's where starting to see this move away from purely serially connected systems that use private point-to-point networks for communication to adopting internet technology. So even the OT technology is becoming more IT-like, which is presenting all the same attack surfaces that exist within IT. So I think what we really need to do is merge that mindset thinking, that resiliency thinking of the OT staff, along with the understanding this much broader attack surface that has always existed within IT, and that needs to be brought together, but alongside these two transformations that are happening at the same time. Digital transformation, which is cloud adoption, remote working, containerization, CI/CD pipelines, and all these ways IT is changing, along with the transformation in the way adversaries to ransomware, where they can monetize. It's no longer malware used to be a high-frequency, low-impact event. Now the same vectors are used to create a high-impact, high-frequency event, so we need to be able to handle that as a BAU activity. And I think the final thing is this operational transformation, which I think our colleagues could talk about better than I can, but operational technology is changing as well, and there's this massive refresh going on. And I just think we need to work better together as a team. It's difficult enough getting IT and security to work within a bank than to get OT and IT and cloud and all these different security teams to work together.
So coming on to question number 2 then, some of the common issues that are come across in CNI. So James, we were speaking before around some of the process and procedures, etc. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that for us, please?
Yeah, of course. So I think when we think about the common challenges in CNI organizations and CNI environments, and specifically in the OT area, we tend to think about the technical challenges. So unsupported and unencrypted protocols, legacy software, we have default passwords. But for me at the moment, there's 2 big common challenges which we're seeing becoming bigger and bigger issues. First of those is really the business. We understand where our issues are. We understand where we want to be. We want to be secure. Getting there is a different animal. In terms of we need so many parts, as James alluded to, we have so many components that we need to be working together. We need a common plan. We need to be testing these things. We need to be moving them forward. At the end of the day, the business wants to be secure. That then comes down to be implemented, and we end up with lots of complexity coming back into our environments again. And the second thing for me is awareness. And go from awareness, security awareness in CNI organizations, to actually being behaviorally secure. The difference between the two, so cyber awareness is, I'd say my mum is cyber aware. She understands that she understands what a phishing email is. She still clicks on it every time we go through a process of telling her what a phishing email is. We show her what to look out for, and you get a phone call going, I've done it again. Behaviorally secure is understanding what the issue is, understanding what you need to do about it, and it's closing that loop. And what we're not seeing at the moment, or one of the big challenges is we're pushing this awareness. Be aware of cybersecurity, be aware of risk, but we're not helping people get to a point where they can do something about it competently. So almost trying to get us to that health and safety mindset of we know what the issues are, we know how things fail, we know how they break, and this is what you do about it.
In terms of common issues, so Philip, in terms of the changing market, etc., around there, do you want to elaborate on that a bit more for us?
Really, the changing market, in particular, the push for decarbonisation is really changing how we build and architect systems for the future. If you think about the traditional energy market, there's a lot of, you start off with a source of energy and it is moved in mass and it's slowly disseminated down into the individual consuming areas. So we've been dependent on securing large and independent pieces of infrastructure, power stations, large substations, moving into distribution space and then down into the home. And as we've seen with things like the attacks on the Ukraine, you've got that move between those layers of defense. So things like attacks on the IT space, having a traditional defense there, and then looking at the techniques used to pivot down and then exploit further pieces of infrastructure, have allowed things like the new MITRE attack framework you mentioned and the ICS attack framework to help us classify and understand the different behaviors, how people are attacking things in the IT space, and then once they've got that foothold, how they attack things in the ICS or OT space. But the biggest challenge now, in particular with decarbonisation, is the drive down into the distribution networks, into traditionally untelemetered areas of our energy networks, where every consumer is potentially a generator. Every consumer is a source of balancing of the energy networks, where they may choose to wash their clothes at a different time of the day in order to save money. Which means that instead of having 400 large substations or 100 large power stations to secure, you've now got millions and millions of individual interconnected devices manufactured at a price point which need to be individually secured, which use traditionally untrusted networks, but now carrying out very critical functions. So I think that's a massively emerging trend within the market, in that we have to still secure this large infrastructure, which will continue to be incredibly important, but we've got to run on two tracks. We need to keep securing that large, heavy, critical infrastructure where a single event can have a singly large impact on society. But we mustn't forget that there are a large number of individual items where we have to think very differently, because we haven't got the ability to layer lots and lots of traditional defensive techniques and detection techniques onto those devices. We have to engineer the security into those.
From another utilities area, what would be your take on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that Phil has said. So the move to distributed generation is a massive, massive transformation for the electricity industry. I've got solar panels, right? So I'm part of the solution, but I'm also part of the problem, because Phil's teams have to actually make that work with all of us turning our generation on and off. And going back to the question about common challenges, for me, one of the reasons that we're having more and more common challenges is because of convergence. So if you look at plant control systems, which we talked about before, you would have systems that are operational technology but running on IT kit. And you'll have those systems that are very similar but performing different roles and have to be treated in very different ways. So in our plant control system, we might well have the safety operator's workstation running on a Windows server. And right next to that will be an absolutely physically identical Windows server, but that will be running the plant historian, which bridges the IT and the OT networks. It's used across the corporate network by the engineers, but it's exposed to the threats from the IT network. So even though they're physically the same and running the same operating system, you have to treat them very differently instead of security. And similarly, convergence is affecting IT and OT more and more, because we've talked about plant control systems, and OT are using Ethernet, as you said, where you've got railway interlockings that I've worked on that use Ethernet now. But in the same way, we've also got IT departments that are having to get exposed to IoT devices and smart sensors and smart watches that they can't patch in exactly the same way. So I think more than common challenges, the whole IT, OT security industry is converging on almost being a similar situation, similar teams, similar skills.
Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time there, but thank you very much for everyone on the panel for joining in. I hope everyone enjoyed that conversation. And we became so passionate about this topic, and we've got more to say, so there is going to be a podcast coming out at some point, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, cheers.